We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's March 29th here in Seoul. I'm Shin Yeun, and you're watching News Generation. Joining me in the studio is a familiar face you might have seen in our regular newscast. It's our and my colleague and economics correspondent, Park Kwon-woo. Welcome.
Morning, Yun. Hi, everyone. I'm Park Kwon-woo, an economics reporter at Arirang News. It's a great pleasure to be here today.
All right, we can't wait to talk to you soon. And it's Choi Ji-hee.
Happy Friday.
Good morning. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. The beloved giant panda, naturally bred and born here in South Korea named Fubao, will leave for China on 3rd of April. Everland Theme Park, where the panda has been raised, released its plans to transport her on its website. If all goes as planned, Fubao will be moved to Incheon International Airport at around 10:40 a.m. on a vibration-free special vehicle. Everland plans to provide fans with one last chance to see the panda by taking her slowly around the theme park for 20 minutes on the day of her departure. Fubao will arrive in China later that afternoon and live at the Giant Panda Conservation Research Center in Sichuan Province. After shutting down more than 7,000 bus operations and causing major delays for commuters during morning rush hour, unionized bus drivers in Seoul returned to work on Thursday afternoon. For the first time in 12 years, they went on a general strike demanding a wage hike. But around 11 hours after they begun, the Seoul Bus Labor Union reached a deal on a 4.48% wage hike, also a $482 holiday bonus. The union represents more than 9 out of 10 of the capital's bus drivers, and during the hours-long strike, many commuters could not get to work on time or had to rely on the subway, which the city had increased in number and operation hours. A heated topic of discussion in Korea is whether an adult who has small portions should be able to order from the kids menu at a restaurant. In an anonymous online post uploaded a few days back, one netizen shared how they saw a female customer ask a pork cutlet restaurant owner if it was okay for her to order from the children's menu. The woman customer allegedly explained that she has very small portions and she does not want to let any food go to waste, but the restaurant owner refused, saying that children's menus are only for customers who bring their child. After minutes of explaining both their sides, the female customer eventually left the restaurant without ordering anything. Netizens who came across this post started their own debate themselves. They asked whether it was appropriate for the customer to be asking for this, citing a customer's right and her consideration of the environment in regards to reducing food waste. Others pointed to the restaurant owner's right and how a business should be operated. Some went as far as criticizing the female customer for crossing the line and being inconsiderate of the restaurant's operation. Now, there's so many arguments surrounding this debate, but where do you personally stand on this issue?
Well, I don't think the female customer was crossing the line or being inconsiderate by wanting to make sure that she wasn't wasting any food in the restaurant. And I understand where she's coming from, and I can totally relate because many of the restaurants here in the country, especially the Korean restaurants, they tend to serve large portions of food. And I know that I can't sometimes finish them as well. So although I don't order from the children's menu, I do sometimes ask the restaurant owner to maybe give me smaller portions of the rice they usually give because I know that I can't finish the regular size. So I think for restaurants, I think it'll be nice if they could consider providing customizable portions of food to make sure that they meet the individual needs of people because these days people really eat alone many times. 혼밥 we say, right? So I think it'll be nice if you could consider that.
Right, and customization is a key word from our generation. We seem to be customizing everything, so I do think that's a great idea we'd like to see being incorporated. But what about you, Kwon? What do you think?
Yes, and I also think similar as what Ji just mentioned, and I think it's really hard to say who's right and wrong because I can understand each person's stance, and it's quite frustrating for both the owner and the customer because they're like all sorts of portions for individuals, for the individuals.
Right.
And I think coming up with solutions like diversifying and customizing the menus for people is a good option. Because like one time I visited a 감자탕 restaurant, which is a Korean-style pork backbone stew restaurant. And they had been selling these stews, the same stews at different prices, 3 different prices, depending on how many backbones it contains. And so I think that kind of customization or diversifying the food prices will be a good option in these kind of situations.
Exactly, and take it from an economics correspondent, I do think that's a really plausible idea to go for. And speaking of customizing and food prices, we are seeing record amounts of inflation these days, so it's really no longer news to hear about high inflation and rising living costs. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today to help young people, particularly university students who might be tight on budget. The government has been rolling out cheap meal stamps, and our economics correspondent Park Gon-woo actually did a coverage on this, which is exactly why he's joining us today in the studio, because he's been reporting on this subject. Now, Gon-woo, before we go on, can you tell us why you first decided to cover this story and how big of a financial burden it is for college students these days with soaring living costs?
Yeah, so first of all, I thought it would be quite interesting to find out how these university students are actually coping with high prices, high costs, especially because in South Korea nowadays, those dining out costs are on the rise for about like nearly 3 years now.
Right.
So, especially because I know that these students have so many to spend on, especially when they go to social gatherings, buying study materials, and so and so. So, and even though they don't earn that much of an income. And so while interviewing these many students, I got to know that they spend about like 10 to 15,000 won, which is around $7.40 and up to more than $11 per meal if they eat out. And that's how much they spend. So yeah, and one other thing I noticed was that some students even skip their meals and eat just once a day, and that was kind of heartbreaking.
It's a financial burden for sure, because if you think about it, we all remember our university lives. We go to school almost every day, and if you eat out every day, that's like $55 a week. Yeah. And given the fact that you're a student, you're not working full time, it's really hard for you to do that. With part-time jobs, how are you going to manage through? It's a real big burden for your wallet. Now, Chi, would you like to empathize and add on to how big of a financial burden it might be for students these days?
Right. Rising living costs is really a burden for university students these days, and they're finding it difficult to make their ends meet just by staying frugal or limiting their consumption. So as a result, more and more students, although this was a regular thing, and I've done part-time jobs before too, I'm sure you two have done them as well. More and more students are engaging in these part-time jobs in order to make extra money for their living expenses or to earn pocket money so that they can really make their ends meet. And there are in fact several different reasons, and let's take a look at the screen to find out the different reasons why South Korean university students engage in these part-time jobs. Now, if you look at the screen, many college students, the primary reason for doing part-time jobs is to earn enough money to cover their living expenses and to have some pocket money, as I said. And the second biggest reason is to save up for studying abroad or even traveling. And also the third reason is to just make sure that they maintain a routine life during their semesters, because often after classes you have a lot of idle time and they just want to make sure that they make the most out of those time and make sure that they live a more fruitful life during their semesters.
Exactly. And actually, you mentioned really great points there. And I do think it is a burden, especially because if you remember, university life is the most prime time for you to be meeting new people, going out, exploring yourself. And Kono, you've actually met some college students yourself to hear what it's like these days and how much they're spending on lunch. So why don't we walk through your coverage first before we continue discussions?
Yes, absolutely. So as you just mentioned, I did get a chance to meet several university students, both on campus and on the streets, to learn more about how these university students are saving up, especially on food expenses. So why don't we take a look at my coverage? At 8 a.m. in a cafeteria inside a university located in Seoul, many students start lining up to have their breakfast.
The meal here is only 1,000 won. I come here pretty much every day of the week.
This meal, which costs only 75 cents under a governmental project, so that students can get a healthy breakfast at a reasonable price, is one way university students in South Korea are lowering food expenses at a time of high prices. But as the only meal available under this program is breakfast, and as data from Statistics Korea showed that dining out prices rose 3.8% on year in February, marking 33 straight months of increases, students are figuring out other ways to cope. Convenience stores are another option for university students who want a cheap meal. This lunchbox costs around 5,000 won, or in US dollars, about $3.70. And convenience stores are also launching promotions to make such food items even cheaper. But students I spoke to said it is not easy for them to budget for food.
After entering university, there are occasions where I have to eat out and drink in order to make more friends.
Freshmen are spending more due to social gatherings where they can make new friends.
I spent about $750 this month as I participated in gatherings and as people tend to order and spend more at those gatherings because we usually split the bill.
Some said they make their own food at home, or sometimes even skip meals when they do not have engagements to lower expenses. One concerned professor said more support is needed.
The government should be actively supporting university students who are our future workers, although they might not have income right now.
She added, local governments should support restaurants near universities, including helping with electricity bills so that they could lower food prices, and that those restaurants should be monitored to ensure they do so.
And that was Konu's coverage. And as we could see, a lot of university students, it might be very difficult for them to get on day by day with high inflation living costs, as you mentioned. But you mentioned really great points there. We saw the 75-cent meals. That is very good in the sense that we don't need to be spending too much while getting good food. And also, I do agree that local governments should be on board with helping university students out by cooperating with university restaurants and nearby facilities. But what are some other notable measures that they're not only universities, but university students are taking these days, Konu?
Yeah, so alongside from what you just mentioned as well, those 75 cents breakfast and buying meals cheaper at convenience stores, I also found out that students are actually using delivery apps such as what's called the 배달geek, a Korean compound word of delivery and dormitory that allows you to order and pick up food that's delivered straight to campus without any delivery fees. So that's what's so special about it. And then also, there's no need to worry about gathering your friends because in order to lower the delivery fees, and then you can also order whatever you want because some days you might not want to order pizza whenever everyone else wants to order pizza. So in those cases, it's very useful. And then other ways where the students told me that they also buy bundles of necessities like detergents and what else? Those toilet papers. And then after buying a bundle of those, they can just share with their friends, and then they can just take as much as they need at a reasonable price. So that's another way. And one last thing I wanted to share was that these students also save mileages at cafes whenever they make a purchase at those places, and then they wait until this day when they can get a expensive beverage that they've been craving for.
Exactly, because that one free stamp gives you access to all types of drinks out there.
Exactly.
But I can tell that a lot of university students are joining heads together, whether it be bundle buying or making sure that their delivery fees go down by making the whole price go up. Are there any other ways that are notable?
Yes, there are a lot of different ways that people or university students are engaging in order to make sure that they're saving money. But first of all, that was a great coverage, by the way, and it really reminded me of my university time as well. And I also do go to cafeterias in universities because I lecture students. And I realized that they're really, really cheap. And even though I'm a full-time worker, I still find them really cheap. And I also eat there a lot to save money. But I can only imagine that it's the best way to eat for university students as well.
75 cents
exactly,
per meal.
Exactly. Anyway, so some other ways that students save money is by purchasing unused tickets from the secondhand trading platforms, because they do have to engage in cultural activities too, but they want to make sure that they're doing it in a cheaper way. And they would also buy or sell gift certificates that they would get on these trading platforms as well. And for young couples who are dating, they find opportunities, free dating opportunities through social media, because they can participate in some events to get free stays or even go to restaurants just to make sure that after making sure that they would review on the restaurant, so they'd be getting free food from the restaurants as well. And they also have like a budget bank account so that they can share the expenses that they use for dating as well, which is a common practice also among university students.
And I think, as you mentioned in your coverage, Konu, as the expert mentioned, if universities and the government work together to really understand the needs of university students out there, whether it be in dating, entertainment, culture, and food, I do think we'll see more policies come about. And so that nearby facilities can also be on board and help young students really cope with high living costs. But to find out whether this is a phenomenon just here in Korea, but also a part in other parts of the world, we're going to hear from a Gen Z living in the state of Wisconsin. So stay tuned for our live interview. We're now going to turn to a Gen Z living in the States. It's Ryan Sujith Tennyson, currently pursuing a master's degree at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Welcome, Ryan.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me on here.
All right, Ryan, we've been talking about how inflation and rising costs of living here in Korea has been affecting the lives of university students, but I'm quite curious as to whether it's affecting people in the States as well. Is it affecting decisions for students as to what to have for lunch?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's being a graduate student, you don't really have a fixed schedule with your academic workload. So it becomes a really dicey situation as to sometimes, like you were discussing, right, whether it's 2 meals a day or 3, depending on how much time you have to prepare your meal. And it's a trade-off between the time and money,
Yeah, Ryan, and I can see how inflation is also an issue going on in the States. Also, Ryan, how are university students, including yourself, trying to save money?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I did before I started was to do extensive research, because one of the the highest expense is your rent. Trying to find a location that isn't too far from your university, but also isn't too expensive. Rent prices here have gone up about 30%, 31% in the last 4 years. So that was one of the major places where you can save money. And cooking together, buying groceries together. I live with another roommate of mine, so we always make our purchases together, and split the cost. So that greatly helps reduce expenses.
I see. Well, Ryan, we all know that it's not easy to always give up on everything just to save money. So what's one thing that seems to always be taking money from your pockets?
Right. I'm trying really hard not to say a good cup of coffee, but most times when you are working on your projects, as you tend to do, you tend to meet at public places. So it's always and you try to squeeze in a meal when you have the time. So most of the times I would say it is your meal and a good cup of coffee to get work done and to help you.
All right, and Ryan, before we let you go, are there any policies that your university or the government there has to help students like yourself to better save up, or any personal tips?
Yeah, so the university here does have an initiative called the Open Seat, where they do have 3 times a week, they do have grocery supplies that are given out. So that also depends on your schedule and when you can make it, and if you can make it in time to get yourself those groceries. And apart from that, if there are any tips, it would be to talk to your peers and talk to people who have been to the university or the area that you're going to, so that you can get a better idea of how things work.
All right, thank you so much, Ryan. It was a pleasure hearing from you today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So inflation isn't just limited to Korea. We're seeing soaring inflation and living costs in all different parts of the world, including the States. And that's why I think it's now or never to really find out how we should be saving up our money during these financially strenuous times, which is exactly why I'd like to end off by asking for a few personal tips or advice, especially coming from an economics correspondent, as to what to do in times like this.
Yes, I do have some tips for you. Personally, I'm using the so-called climate card, which allows me to gain access to unlimited public transport on buses and subways in Seoul. So that allows me to reduce almost 1/3 of how much I used to spend a month only on public transport. And I'm aware that other countries, such as Germany and Austria, also has similar cards like this. So that's one tip. And then another one is that I actually get cash rebates from cashback programs whenever I use less electricity or heating and things like that. So that's quite helpful for saving both your money and the environment as well.
That's really nice. You're saving not only the economical situation of yourself, but also the environment. Now, what about you, Jihi?
Well, I believe that the best way to save money is to really spend less, but to figure out where you can spend less in. I think it's a good idea to always keep a log of your living expenses, daily expenses, which I do not manually, but I use an app to make sure that I keep a track of the things I use money on. And so, for example, Ryan mentioned coffee. We can't give up on that. We all agree. But I think you could try and cut down on those to save money and maybe buy the drip bags to have coffee at home. And also you could buy fewer clothes maybe. And initially I recall using an app back in university myself. It was an app that would help you to gain pennies. And I remember consistently using it for a year. And I saved up to 100,000 won, which is about $85.
Yeah.
And that's huge for a university student, you know? Yeah, so I remember using that app as well. So always do remember that every penny can add up to a significant sum. So saving the little things and maybe saving up in these ways is a good way to save money in these difficult times.
Every penny counts, and especially if you're a university student watching this, I think we want to emphasize that this is the prime time of your life to try everything out, whether it be traveling with your friends or going out and trying new food, meeting new people. And it's very unfortunate that we're living in such high living cost times, but hopefully today's episode really helped you or shed light as to the solutions and options you have out there. So you make sure to have you throw one rock and hit two birds with one stone by making sure not only to be financially well off, but also to experience everything you can as a college student. Now, in the meantime, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Park Gun-woo
Thanks for having me.
and Choi Ji-hee.
Always a pleasure.
All right, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you next week. We are
News Generation.